All right, I think we're good to get started. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming here. I'm here today to talk about my research on voice cloning and vishing, specifically, and I'll just get right into it. Unfortunately, I have had so many Wi-Fi issues, which I should have anticipated considering that this is DEF CON, but so I don't have any of my demos or audio clips or anything for what the actual voice cloning sounds like, so just keep that in mind and bear with me on this, all right? Okay, we'll just get right into it. So my name is Katherine Rackliffe, and I just graduated with a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity from Brigham Young University, and I'm starting my PhD in like 2 weeks at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And what I'll be studying is phishing and human-computer interaction and all this kind of stuff that I'm really interested in. Okay, so this is the demo that would be super awesome, so I just want you to all imagine a really awesome voice demonstration of what voice cloning sounds like. But essentially what we're getting into is if you've ever used voice cloning before and you've ever heard like a comparison between the real voice and a voice clone, they sound exactly the same. It's really hard to tell the difference and is what we found, and this is kind of what the research will get into. Here's another thing. So a lot of banks will use voice verification nowadays where they will use, where they try to use your voice as a way to authenticate getting into your account. And there's so many, this is just one example of the ways that our voice is used as a way to authenticate ourselves. And I also had a very fancy demo of my voice clone saying this voice verification at Schwab, my voice is my password, but you'll just have to imagine that's coming from a voice clone instead of the actual person here. But so this is just one example of how voice cloning can be used. And so just like some terms that I'm sure you all know because we're at DEF CON. There's phishing, which is just sending malicious messages to collect information. There's vishing, and this is when it uses the human voice. And then cloned vishing, which is this new term where it's using a phone call that uses an AI cloned voice. So some common attacks that I have seen, these are like on the news or something like that, is family members calling for help. So it'll be someone calling and it's like someone's child or something like that calling for help, saying that they're being held for ransom. And it's really easy to make these voice clones. It only takes about like 5 minutes of work, and it's really easy to replicate. Another one is authority figures. You might get someone's boss calling and saying that they need something, but it's actually a voice clone. And then of course, fooling voice verification for banks. And here's some real-world news articles. How many people heard about the company director's voice that was cloned and just stole a ton of money that way by using the same sort of voice verification that Schwab uses? And then also there's again a lot of the ransom attacks that just they don't attack super important people, they just attack very regular people going about their day. So why study this? The thing about cybersecurity is cybersecurity moves really, really fast, and academia, in comparison, moves really slow. So it's really hard to put together a study like this, but the interesting thing is this is why there hasn't been any study on this. These voice cloning attacks really only started becoming popular about 2 years ago, and it took me a whole year to put together a paper about it. So the things we wanted to study with our paper was how effective are these voice clones, and are people prepared to spot these types of scans? And also, how do we convince others that this is a real risk? And this is the kind of thing where a paper is really helpful because it gives us statistics. It gives us reasons why people may or may not respond to phishing messages. Now the question is how to study this. The issue with trying to phish a bunch of people is that the university ethics board really doesn't like it when you try to do that. So there was a lot of ethics paperwork that went into this, and there were a lot of questions that we were trying to ask when we started out with this phishing study. So eventually, after a few months of working on this, we decided on a way to study it. So we just did some boring stuff like a lit review. I don't think any of you really care about the lit review right now. But then what we did is we went for professors. We cloned a bunch of professors' voices at my university. We created a malicious message, and the message is just introducing the professor, then saying that the professor is updating the class registration and they need the student's ID number. Now, there's a couple of things that should be really suspicious to people who are getting this message. For one, all professors already have access to the student ID number. It's something that the professor should already have access to. And another, it's coming from an unknown number. And these are all things that should really factor into people being suspicious of it, like a real phishing message. Then we sent the message to the students, and then we analyzed the results. We had 4 different groups that we were going on with. We had a text message. This was kind of a control group. We wanted to make sure that, this is like the traditional way that phishing messages have been sent. We all get a billion text messages a day that are, kind of suspicious. We had a robo text-to-speech, and this is also just to see what happens when there's like not a very sophisticated robot voice in play. And then we had the AI cloned voice. We just used like one of the many models of voice cloning on the market called VoCloner. 11 Labs is also a really popular one that was but we didn't use that one. Then we had a real voice. So this was a real voice recording of the professor speaking into and saying the same message to the students. So yeah, so there are some preliminary findings. These are just other articles and things like that people have found. The one that says that people can't really tell the difference between an AI voice clone and a real voice, and which matches up with the results that we got. And a lot more news articles. Oh yeah, I don't know what happened here. Oh, yeah, it's artistic actually. That's what's going on there. And yeah, so there's a lot of, there's been plenty of news articles about it, but again, not very much academic literature of it, because again, the academic world takes a while to catch up. So these are the responses that we got. Most of them, we got no response, which is good. We like seeing no responses when we do a phishing study. This means that people ignored it and just brushed it aside. Even better is reporting it, but we had a very small number of people who reported it. Not very many people reported it as phishing. We had a lot that just responded with their ID, which is not what we want. That's giving up their personal information. And then we had a lot of people who asked for verification. This is kind of a weird group. This is the people who were like, wasn't sure if it was a scam. We had one student ask the professor to say what the lecture was on the day before to make sure that it was really the professor messaging, and things like that. And so that was this category here. Then we had the sent through other means. So this would be people who sent through email instead of through text. And this was really interesting because it kind of gives an insight onto how regular people respond to these phishing messages, where a lot of them, when interviewed, would talk about how they didn't trust that it was coming from an unknown phone number. And that's a really interesting example of what we got from the study. So yeah, these are that list of responses. Now, what was the most effective? So yeah, we had the real voice recording, the voice clone, the text-to-speech, and the text message. The text message, we had a really high response rate. A ton of people responded to the text message. This is probably because it's really easy to respond to a text message, and we also monitored Gen Z, and as a member of that generation myself, I know I don't really check like a voice recording. That takes too much time. So text-to-speech, we had a really low response rate. We did still have some people who sent in their student ID, even though it was clearly a robotic voice and it wasn't the professor. And so when interviewed, some of these students would say that they thought it was just the professor being too busy to text it out, and so they were just using text-to-speech. I don't really, yeah, but it was interesting to know that they still would respond with their student ID. Then we had the voice clone and the real voice recording, which sounded very similar, but we did have some variation in responses to people who responded. It's the same response rate, so this shows that people can't tell the difference between the voice clone and the real voice, and so they would just respond the same to the voice clone or either of that. And yeah, so people can't tell the difference, particularly over the phone. There was some interesting results that we got with the real voice, where some people would say they didn't respond to it because it sounded like the professor was reading from a script, which, to be fair, was true. They were reading from a script I gave them. And in that case, the voice clone actually sounded more natural than the real person. So we got some people reporting it as a phish when it wasn't. Also, another thing when interviewed, a lot of people, when asked, did not know which group they were in. I would have them listen to the recording and guess if it was a voice clone or a real voice, and no one was able to get it right. They thought that sometimes they thought the real voice was a voice clone, sometimes they thought the voice clone was a real voice, and it was just really hard to tell, especially when it's over a phone and it's all granular. So yeah, what can we do now? This is like, again, like the thing about, cybersecurity, the cybersecurity conferences is we all know pretty much like what we need to do in order to stay safe on the internet. But the issue is there's a lot of people who don't. And a lot of people don't know about voice cloning and aren't aware of this new technology that can come and attack their everyday lives. So we need to make sure that we tell people about it. We need to make sure that they know that this is an attack that can happen. And we need to ensure that we can keep people safe. All right, yeah, thank you. And so this is just a summary. We've talked about what voice cloning is and how it's used, and then a study that I put together, and also the results. And then I have my website and my LinkedIn if people would like to take pictures. But yeah, we should have plenty of time for questions. I don't know, how am I doing on time? Good, good. Okay, awesome. Yes, here. Yeah, that's a really good question. So the thing about an academic study is you need to obtain consent for everything. So we went to the professors and we asked them to just speak about their research, so a really generic topic, how they would talk in the lecture, for about 1 minute of audio. But yeah, we wanted to make sure the professors knew what would go into the sample that we were giving to the AI to train it. Yes.
Were all the professors that you used, did they all teach the same subject, or did you get different professors across the whole university?
Oh yeah, really good question. Yeah, so we had a lot of different professors. I think we ended up with like 5 different professors. We had one that taught accounting, one that taught biology. We avoided anyone in like tech or computer science or anything like that. That was the only thing we tried to avoid. But yeah, accounting was a really interesting one. We had a master's, like a professor who taught like master's students. And that was really interesting because they tended to do better. And we think that was just like, that could be a multiple factors. That could just be like age and like also getting mandatory cybersecurity trainings at work. We're still working on going through the interview data to try and figure out what factored into that. Yes. I would be faster with the ethics paperwork. Also, I would try to test a different population because, again, this is pretty common. The people who are being targeted aren't really college students. It's more like senior citizens and people who aren't as experienced. And also, we would try to do voicemail. That would be something to try and test. But yeah, that might be options for a further study down the line. Yes, here. We sent it as a voice note. So yeah, we would send all the voice recordings as just like an MP3 file that they could listen to or look at the transcript of. Yeah. All right. If there, yes.
The response was more linked to the question, a little bit saucy, or they recognize the AI voice.
Yeah, that's what we found is like all people when interviewed, no one was able to pinpoint the fact that it sounded like a voice clone as the reason why they didn't respond to it. It was always, this came from an unknown number, so I didn't trust it. And that was the biggest thing that people were looking out for is like it came from an unknown number, so I didn't trust it. There were some people with the text message who would say like, oh, it was written too formally or it wasn't written formally enough. It didn't sound like my professor in that way. But that was with the text message group. And it was interesting because with the interviews, we didn't really get anyone saying it didn't sound like the professor with a voice clone because, well, it's their voice. How does that not sound like them? So yeah, is it back here? That would be really interesting. Yeah, we did talk about that a little, but again, that's kind of like, that would kind of be a different study, a different question that we would be asking. But yeah, so, yeah, and again, the thing about phishing is it's a really hard thing to study because there's so many additional factors that go into it. I didn't think that the unknown number would be such a big clue for people, but I might have, considered spoofing the professor's phone number, which would make the ethics board very unhappy with me as well, and also probably the University Security Operations Center. But, that's just the risk of doing research. Yes. Yeah. So that's the thing is like there are some. This is something that AI isn't quite. It's like almost there where it can like make a natural conversation on the phone, but it does tend to have really long pauses when speaking with it. I don't know if anyone's had like the AI agents on like that are trying to run a phone tree. They're kind of like not there yet. But yeah, I think it would be really interesting to run this study in like 2 years when the AI's gotten to a point where it can hold a natural conversation over the phone. But I don't know if it's quite there yet. Yes. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's close. But also those AI agents are a little bit pricey right now as well. Again, attackers are going to be using the free and cheap stuff, which is this right now. It didn't cost me anything to make the voice clones for reference. So yeah, it's just something to keep in mind with like what they're going to be using. Yes. Ooh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should go into that because it's like, getting into the academic part of it. But yeah, so the way we got consent from students is we just, so we basically collected their phone numbers and said we were running a random study about sending messages to people's phones. We were very vague about it. We just like had an implied consent form built into the survey. We spent a lot of time arguing with the IRB over this. We were like, okay, they won't come under psychological harm or anything because of this study. But yeah, and then we would wait 2 weeks after collecting all their data, so they would all forget about taking the survey. And I did ask later if anyone was able to connect the two, but no one was really able to make that connection. So 2 weeks is a good amount of time for that. And then after sending out the message, we would wait 48 hours, and then we would send out a debrief message explaining that it was a phishing message and that it was part of a study. So that's how we did the consent things with the, yes. Yes, yeah. Yeah, I don't have a chart for that right now, but it does match up with what you said, where it was like mostly in the first hour. The voice recordings or like the recordings tended to take a little bit more time, probably because people would listen to it. Some people I talked to would say they waited to go home and listen to the message, for example. But yeah, so that's that does match up with what we've seen. That would be a good chart to put in here. I should keep that in mind. Yes. No, yeah, so it was just Apple does voice note, but you can just send an MP3 recording to Android or iPhone. So yeah, it's either or. That would be another good thing to track. Unfortunately, we did not collect that information of what model of phone they had. So that would be really interesting. There's a lot of interesting questions that would come about this. Yeah, I feel like I have way too much time. All right, yes.
From a psychology perspective, how many students participated in
In total, about at least 250. Am I around 300? I don't have the actual count off the top of my head. We ran 2 minutes? Okay, awesome. Yeah. So I might just, if people want to talk with me after or whatever, that's also awesome. But yeah, I went through my material too quickly. Yeah. All right. Yes. Oh, sorry. I'll wait. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I can answer your question now. Yes, Schwab Bank uses it, AI for verifying your voice. And there's some other banks that do it too, but I think it's mostly Schwab that's the big one. Yeah, Chase. Oh, yeah. I don't use Schwab Bank personally, but because, just from this presentation, I could give all this stuff. Okay, all right.